to the Revere Report. It's June 9th, 2026. And we're here live. This morning, I'm coming to you because 3 stories are developing in real time that every American citizen needs to understand. I'm going to start by being direct about my approach today. Everything I tell you is sourced to documented, publicly available, verified information. We're talking about information from CNN, ABC News, CBC News, Fox News, The Times of Israel, CENTCOM's official statements, the U.S. Department of Justice official press releases, House Homeland Security Committee official documents, the Migration Policy Institute, the Department of Labor, and multiple other verified sources. I'm going to name my sources as I go, because on this channel, a claim without a source is an opinion, and this channel deals in documented facts. So here's what we're going to cover today. First thing is the Iran war. Obviously a major news event, current event. Day 101, a U.S. Apache helicopter was shot down by an Iranian drone near the coast of Oman, reported by ABC News just hours ago. And President Trump, well, he made 2 phone calls to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu within hours, stopping Israel from launching what sources describe as a significant attack on Tehran. Netanyahu stood down. Iran and Israel have both halted major offensive operations, but both say they will resume if the other side attacks first. And the ceasefire is a thread. Inside Iran, the people have been in the streets, facing a regime that has executed protesters and deployed security forces to maintain control. The second thing that we're going to go over today is the rampant fraud epidemic in America. And I'm not talking about California alone. The entire federal government. The Department of Justice's National Fraud Enforcement Division has, in recent weeks, secured convictions representing over $1.1 billion in fraud in under 3 weeks. We have specific names of people charged, convicted, and sentenced. And we have the biggest healthcare fraud takedown in U.S. history, $14.6 billion in alleged fraud. And it's got 324 defendants that have been charged in that fraud. And the third thing we're going to go over in today's live stream here is immigration. The full documented, nonpartisan picture, the Biden-era numbers that every American deserves to know, the H-1B visa corruption that is displacing American workers, and that's a big one right there. We got Project Firewall, Texas Governor Greg Abbott's action, and the specific cases involving forged credentials and worker displacement concerning the H-1B visa corruption. And then, of course, we're going to go over the constitutional framework that governs all of it. So, now, in saying that, if you're ready to go, let's ride. Here we go. I think first we'll go over the Iran war. And I want to open this segment by doing something that I do at the start of every Iran war segment on this channel. I want to acknowledge the human beings on all sides of this conflict. American service members, Israeli soldiers, Iranian civilians, the people of Lebanon, Kuwait, Bahrain, and every other country that has been pulled into this. This is not an abstraction. These are people's lives. Everything I report today is given in the context of that reality. And I salute every one of them. So now, and this is breaking news as of this morning. A U.S. AH-64 Apache helicopter has been brought down by an Iranian drone near the coast of Oman, according to U.S. officials. Now, CENTCOM confirmed the Apache went down near Oman on Monday, June 8th. So I guess it was yesterday. I'm reading this directly this news bulletin directly from my documented source. So I guess it went down on Monday, June 8th. The helicopter was assigned to Task Force Shikra of the 101st Combat Aviation Brigade, 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault. And the source for this information was the ABC News live updates. And the last update was June 9th, 2026. And that was at 3:08 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, it said June 9th, but excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold today. So bear with me, please. I apologize. Now, at the time of this broadcast, the status of the crew is still developing. CENTCOM has not yet released the crew information. As always, we do not speculate on casualties until CENTCOM officially confirms. And I will update this as information becomes available. This is a significant escalation on the part of Iran. An AH-64 Apache is a frontline American attack helicopter. Not a drone, not an unmanned system. It carries a crew. Its loss to an Iranian drone strike represents a documented escalation in Iran's capability and willingness to engage American military assets during what is nominally a ceasefire. We all know the regime, though. They say one thing and they do the complete opposite. And then they go on their live news and boast that they're killing the infidels. These people have been all about kill the Americans. And we still have people inside this country that are angry about what we're doing over there. Personally, I feel we should have just created a parking lot out of the whole country. But that's my opinion, and it also would have devastated many innocent lives. So that can't happen. But as far as the regime goes, we should wipe out every person associated with that regime. It is a terrorist regime. It's been funding terror all over the globe for 50 years. Their main goal is death. Their whole lives is focused on dying because they feel that they're going to be honored and that their existence is going to be better after death. Retarded. So here we go. Here's the most significant diplomatic event of the last 48 hours. And it was reported by CNN, the Times of Israel, and Axios simultaneously. Israel was preparing for a significant attack in Tehran on Monday when U.S. President Donald Trump placed a phone call to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to tell him to hold off on further retaliatory strikes, according to an Israeli source and a U.S. official familiar with the matter. The intervention appeared to have worked. Netanyahu announced afterward that Israel had halted attacks on Iran for now. It was Trump's second phone call to Netanyahu in a matter of hours. In an earlier conversation, Trump similarly directed the Israeli leader to back off strikes in response to the barrage of missiles Iran had launched at Israel. The source for this information was CNN, and it was compiled from live news coverage over June 7th and 8th, 2026. Trump told Axios that he warned the Israeli Prime Minister that he would isolate himself if he continued to strike Iran. And that also was from CNN, but they were citing Axios, and that was on June 8th. This is a documented moment of strategic significance. The President of the United States personally intervened twice to prevent a major Israeli strike on the Iranian capital. Excuse me. A strike that was ready to launch. This tells you several things that the constitutional record on this channel requires us to examine. It tells you that the United States and Israel, while closely coordinated, do not share identical objectives in this war. People have been all over social media and out in the streets saying that we're fighting Israelis' war. And no, we're not. What we're doing is protecting the globe from nuclear weapons and opening the Strait of Hormuz and making it so Iran does not pose a threat and cannot place tolls on that shipping lane for the global economy. Things are in process right now, so sure, the global economy is suffering right now, but it'll be better soon, because there's no way that Iran can outdo the United States. We've got the greatest military on the planet. It tells you that the United States and Israel... Okay, no. I already did that. Okay, no. Sorry. Like I said, I'm not feeling well today, so I'm kind of... I'm kind of not with it right now. So... Trump's intervention suggests Washington believes a strike on Tehran at this moment would damage ongoing peace negotiations. The fact that Netanyahu required 2 phone calls and that Trump invoked the threat of isolation tells you the tension between the two allies is real and documented. And it also gives proof that we're not fighting Israel's war. We're not doing Israel's bidding. And the current status of hostilities is this. Following Trump's phone calls, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced his country had accepted the U.S. administration's request to halt strikes on Iran, but at the same time said attacks in Lebanon will continue. Iran also suspended its operations against Israel, but warned it would resume if Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon continued. So, bottom line, they're not going to listen. They're going to keep shooting at each other, which is okay because the Iranian regime wants to wipe Israel completely off the planet. They want to kill them more than they do the Americans. So, in all honesty, we can't expect them to just let it happen. So, all right, so A top Iranian official told CNN that Tehran has no problem pushing forward with peace talks so long as Iran is confident that the U.S. side is being honest and sincere. That source is from CNN on June 8th. Iran's airspace returned to normal conditions and flight operations are expected to resume, according to Iran's Civil Aviation Organization, citing Iranian state media. Israel said it will lift restrictions on schools and workplaces on Tuesday, which is today, at 6 a.m. local time. Sources for that information is again CNN. On June 8th, Israeli airstrikes hit a petrochemical facility in southwest Iran. Part of an Iranian ballistic missile was found in the desert near Jericho in the West Bank after being fired towards Israel. People in Tel Aviv took cover in bomb shelters during an Iranian missile strike attack. Passengers at Ben Gurion Airport sheltered during an Iranian missile strike. Israeli Iron Dome missiles streaked across the sky to intercept incoming projectiles over northern Israel. The sources of that information is the Times of Israel live blog on June 8th, citing AFP and Flash 90. Iran's top negotiator, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf, stated that Iran will defeat the United States naval blockade of Iranian ports, blaming the maritime restrictions in part for the latest military escalation. He framed the blockade as a war crime and part of the enemy's conspiracy. Trump responded by saying the blockade would remain in place in full force until a final peace agreement is reached. Trump has said the blockade gives Washington more leverage over Iran than any military strike could possibly do. And the sources for that is CNN, citing Tasnim News Agency, June 8th, 2026. Now, I don't know about you. I think that we're doing the right thing by blocking all the Iranian ships. I mean, the more we constrict their money flow, the better off we are. Now, we're going to document this from the beginning for viewers just joining the Revere Report for the first time here today. Here's the verified timeline and verified military numbers from both sides. Operation Epic Fury began February 28, 2026, with joint U.S.-Israeli strikes. CENTCOM confirmed more than 1,250 targets struck in the first 24-hour blitz using Tomahawks, B-2 stealth bombers, and attack drones. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed. Dozens of senior IRGC commanders were killed. Iran's nuclear infrastructure was significantly degraded. American casualties to date, 6 U.S. service members confirmed killed. 3 in the initial retaliatory strikes at a base in Kuwait on March 1st, and 2 more confirmed when CENTCOM recovered remains on March 2nd. An additional American killed in separate Kuwait operations. 5 were seriously wounded in the initial phase. The sources for that is Fox News citing CENTCOM on March 2nd, 2026. Plus, we've got the Apache crew whose status is developing today. The Iranian casualties to date. According to Al Jazeera's verified death toll tracker, citing Iran's Ministry of Health, at least 3,468 people have been killed in U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran since February 28th. The victims ranged in age from 8 months to 88 years, including 7 infants, 376 children, and 496 women. More than 26,500 have been injured. An additional 3,371 were killed in Lebanon and 28 in Gulf states. The sources for that information is Al Jazeera tracker as of June 1st, 2026. I present these numbers because the documented record on both sides belongs to the American people, and the Revere Report is not in the business of selective reporting. Now, A big thing here is inside Iran. And here's the story the Iran war coverage consistently underreports, and it is arguably the most important human story in this entire conflict. The Iranian protests that began December 28, 2025, before the first U.S. or Israeli missile was fired, represents the most serious challenge to the Islamic Republic since 1979 revolution. On December 28, 2025, protests erupted in Tehran. They quickly spread across the country and evolved into the most serious challenge to the Islamic Republic since the Woman Life Freedom Movement in 2022 and 2023. On January 8, security forces launched a crackdown so brutal that some observers described it as Iran's Babi Yar, given its tremendous scale. It marked the deadliest incident of repression since the Islamic Republic took power in 1979. The protests followed a year of economic freefall. Iran's rial, which is their money, had lost more than 40% of its value, and ultimately more than 90% of its value since the United States reimposed sanctions into 2018. The source is the Britannica, citing multiple verified news organizations. Now, at least 648 protesters were killed across 14 provinces since demonstrations began December 28, 2025. Authorities arrested more than 10,700 people and imposed a near total internet blackout since January 8th, according to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency. Iran rushed to execute at least one protester, Irfan Soltani, a 26-year-old man from Fardi's district of Karaj, within days of his arrest. His family received no information about his whereabouts for 3 days. When security agents contacted them, they were told he had already been sentenced to death. The source for that is the Daily Caller, citing Iran Wire and Iran Human Rights, January 2026. The death toll surged to approximately 2,000 as the regime began shooting civilians who were not even involved in the protest. Iranian uniformed security forces on motorcycles were spotted opening fire on bystanders in the city of Fardi. More than 10,700 people were also detained over 2 weeks of protests. The source for that information is the New York Post, and it's citing BBC, Persian, and AFP, 2026. As recently as June 2nd and 3rd, 2026, with the war ongoing, Iranian students in Tehran, Mashhad, and Hamadan staged protests outside the Ministry of Education, chanting, "Students are awake, they loathe discrimination," and "Students will die, but will not accept humiliation." In Tehran, Karaj, Mashhad, Ilham, and Bagmalek, resistance units set fire to large posters of the former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The regime has kept all its repressive forces deployed in the streets, fearing another eruption of protests far more than any foreign conflict. The sources on that information is the National Council of Resistance of Iran, June 3rd, 2026, citing PMOI MEK resistance units. Now, as of June 6, 2026, activists in Zahedan took to the streets holding placards condemning both historical and present tyrannies, chanting "No to monarchy, no to the supreme leader, and yes to freedom and equality." The source for that information is NCRI on June 6th, 2026. This is the documented human picture inside Iran that no missile strike can fully capture. The Iranian people, 2,000 killed by their own government, 10,700 arrested, Irfan Soltani executed within days of his arrest, are fighting the same regime that America is fighting. They have been fighting it longer, and they are still fighting it today. And now, from the constitutional lens, the founders placed the power to declare war in Congress. Article 1, Section 8, specifically to ensure that no single person could commit the American Republic to armed conflict without the accountability of the legislative branch. The House voted 215 to 208 last week to direct the president to end hostilities. The White House called the resolution unconstitutional. The Senate has not acted. Pakistani mediators are in Tehran. A peace deal remains unsigned. That is the documented constitutional status of this war today. The founders' framework and the question of who has the authority to begin and end this conflict remains the most important unresolved constitutional question in American government right now. Now, many don't agree with the war in Iran. I personally am full on in agreement of it. I just think that more action should be taken to end it, and I do not for 1 second believe that the terrorist regime of the IRGC is going to comply with anything that it says in negotiations. Enough with the Iran war. Let's move on to the second story today. The second story this morning is the documented epidemic of fraud against the American taxpayer and the unprecedented enforcement action now being taken against that fraud. I want to be direct about what this segment is. It is a report on documented, verified, court-filed criminal charges, guilty pleas, and federal sentences from the United States Department of Justice official press releases and federal court records. Not allegations in political speeches, not unverified claims, official Department of Justice filings, court sentences, and documented facts. And these are all publicly available for you to look up. Now, what is the National Fraud Enforcement Division? President Donald Trump signed an executive order in March of 2026 creating an anti-fraud task force led by none other than Vice President J.D. Vance. The National Fraud Enforcement Division, making California and Los Angeles area a particular focus of national anti-fraud efforts. The source for that information is CNN, April 3rd, 2026. Now, the DOJ announced the biggest healthcare fraud crackdown in U.S. history, charging 324 defendants, including 96 licensed medical professionals, in connection with over $14.6 billion in alleged fraud. The operation introduced a healthcare fraud data fusion center utilizing AI and cloud computing to enhance interagency collaboration. Notable cases include a $10.6 billion transnational Medicare fraud scheme and a $650 million Medicaid scam in Arizona. The source for that information is Medical Economics, citing the Department of Justice announcement, June of 2026. And let me give you some specific names and specific sentences from the documented federal record. Now, convicted and sentenced, Marco Scamarone, 34, of Tamarack, Florida, sentenced to 70 months in federal prison for participating in a scheme to defraud Medicare and launder more than $2.2 million in illicit healthcare fraud proceeds. He co-owned two fraudulent durable medical equipment companies, Braces and Orthotics LLC, and Stone Oak Durable Medical Equipment LLC. Jose Mendez, 34, of Coral Springs, Florida, sentenced to 78 months in federal prison for the same scheme. Rene Vasquez, 33, of Tamarack, Florida, sentenced to 60 months in federal prison for the same scheme. So all three of them were involved in that particular scheme. The source for that information is the Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs official press release in May of 2026. A Minneapolis man was sentenced to 43 months in federal prison for his role in a $250 million fraud scheme that exploited a federally funded child nutrition program during COVID-19 pandemic. A Jefferson Parish, Louisiana resident was sentenced to 70 months in prison for obtaining over $350,000 through fraudulent Paycheck Protection Program loans using funds in the names using falsified tax forms, and also fraudulently obtained Energy Rental Assistance Program funds in the names of numerous purported renters. A Detroit surgeon was sentenced to 12 months in prison for his involvement in a scheme to submit fraudulent claims to Medicare for psychotherapy services. A Robeson County, North Carolina woman was sentenced to 10 months in prison for submitting a false application to the SBA to receive a $150,000 economic injury disaster loan. A Toby Hanna, Pennsylvania man was sentenced to 30 months in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $352,155 for misappropriating COVID relief funds and wire fraud. Sources: Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs on April 17th, 2026. There's more. A Jefferson Parish resident was sentenced to 70 months in prison for obtaining over $350,000 in fraudulent PPP loans using falsified tax forms. A Florida man sentenced to 24 months in prison for his role in a $33 million healthcare fraud and kickback scheme in Newark, New Jersey. A Kauai man was sentenced to 14 months in prison following his guilty plea for making a false statement to the SBA for $1.4 million in funds. An Erie, Pennsylvania resident was indicted for wire fraud and theft of government property, accepting bribes to approve more than $500,000 in fraudulent unemployment compensation claims. 5 Romanian nationals were charged for allegedly stealing nearly $1 million worth of food assistance benefits from low-income families in Ohio and California. The sources for that is the Department of Justice, Office of Public Affairs, April 25th, 2026. That's just a few. There's so many more. We could go on and go on. Here we go with something else. More fraud. Brett Blackman was the founder and CEO of Health Splash, which owned DMERX, an internet platform that did not facilitate legitimate medicine, but instead industrialized fraud at national scale. The National Fraud Enforcement Division's Healthcare Fraud Unit secured 6 trial convictions in under 3 weeks, representing more than $1.1 billion in fraud losses across 6 distinct schemes, including Blackman's digital health platform that industrialized Medicare fraud, and a prosecution of a physician who outbilled every other Medicare provider in the country for Botox. The Healthcare Fraud Unit has completed 9 trials in 2026, all of which resulted in convictions. And the source is the Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs on June 4th, 2026. In the District of Arizona, prosecutors charged Farrokh Jarar Ali, a billing company executive based in Pakistan and the UAE, for allegedly orchestrating a $650 million Medicaid fraud scheme involving at least 41 Arizona substance abuse treatment facilities. The source on that is Medical Economics in June 2026, and they're citing the Department of Justice records. Federal officials arrested 8 people in and around Los Angeles for healthcare fraud schemes totaling $50 million. 5 cases involved hospice care centers in Glendale, Artesia, Tarzana, and Simi Valley that allegedly billed Medicare for patients who were not terminally ill and did not qualify for hospice services. One person was arrested in Idaho and another in Los Angeles for allegedly defrauding a West Coast labor union's health care plans, and an additional person arrested in Los Angeles was accused of forging immigration medical documents. The source for that information is CNN, April 3rd, 2026. And in January of 2026, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton launched investigations into 3 North Texas companies accused of running ghost offices to fraudulently sponsor the ever-lovely H-1B visas. The businesses allegedly listed homes as corporate addresses and advertised products that do not exist, depriving U.S. citizens of job opportunities. The source for that information is lighthousehq.com, citing Texas Attorney General's Office, January 2026. And here's what the documented numbers show overall. Since March 2007, the National Fraud Division's Healthcare Strike Force program has charged more than 6,200 defendants who collectively billed federal health care programs and private insurers more than $45 billion. The source on that is the actual official Department of Justice, and that statement was made in June of 2026. That is $45 billion documented, charged, prosecuted from one enforcement program in less than 20 years. That is your money taken from Medicare, the program funded by your payroll taxes across your entire working life, taken from Medicaid, the program that serves the most vulnerable Americans, taken from PPP loans that were supposed to save small businesses during a national emergency. We're talking the COVID-19 pandemic. Now here's the auditor's documented findings on the California state fraud. I covered this in depth on Thursday's stream, but here is the summary for context. California's own nonpartisan state auditor has officially designated 8 state agencies as high risk. The EDD admitted to $55 billion in unemployment fraud, including payments sent to convicted murderers by name. First Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Asalai stated publicly that California has spent $24 billion on homelessness and no one can account for where the money went. Homelessness is rampant in California. $24 billion there's no dent in it. Obviously that money went into somebody's pocket. Federal audits demand California repay over $1 billion in improperly spent Medicaid funds. The estimated total fraud burden approaches $250 billion. That's just in California, folks. Just in California alone. Can we say Gavin Newsom? Now here's the constitutional lens on all of it. The founders built into Article 1 of the Constitution an explicit requirement that Congress control the federal purse. Madison wrote in Federalist 58 that the power of the purse may, in fact, be regarded as the most complete and effectual weapon for obtaining a redress of every grievance. The redress of every grievance. The power of the purse is the people's most powerful constitutional tool, but it only works if the citizens holding their representatives accountable know where the money is going and where it is being stolen. That is what today's fraud numbers are about. Not partisan politics, constitutional accountability. The public's money. We the people's money, the public's right to know where it went. Don't you think we should know where the money went? I mean, we work hard for that money. I work hard every day, pay my taxes. Now, the third topic today is immigration. And I want to approach it the same way I approach everything on this channel, with the documented record. All of it. Not the version that helps one side's argument. The full picture. These numbers come from These numbers come from the House Homeland Security Committee's official fact sheet, ICE official data, CBP official data, and the Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute. Since the start of fiscal year 2021, U.S. Customs and Border Protection recorded more than 10.8 million encounters nationwide. That was just in 2020, or since the start of 2021, including more than 8.72 million at the southwest border. Excuse me. More than 390 illegal aliens on the terrorist watch list were apprehended attempting to cross the southwest and northern borders between ports of entry since the beginning of federal fiscal year 2021. That's an increase of more than 3,000% compared to fiscal years 2017 and 2020. Individuals from more than 160 countries were encountered. The Biden-Harris administration released millions of inadmissible aliens into the country without adequate vetting or screening, in addition to roughly 2 million more who entered as known gotaways. The source for this information is the House Homeland Security Committee official fact sheet, and that came out October 24th, 2024. We've come a long way from that. I want to give the full picture on the criminal history numbers because these have been disputed and the context matters. As of July 21st, 2024, there were 662,566 non-citizens with criminal histories on ICE's national non-detained docket. Non-detained. That's floating around somewhere in our country, including 13,099 criminally convicted of murder. However, DHS spokesperson Luis Miranda stated, "The data goes back decades. It includes individuals who entered the country over the past 40 years or more, the vast majority of whose custody determination was made long before the Trump administration." The source on that was ABC News, citing ICE letter to Representative Tony Gonzalez and DHS official statement, October 2024. In June 2021, less than 5 months into the Biden administration, there were 405,786 convicted criminal non-citizens on ICE's non-detained docket. That means they're not in custody. In August 2016, during the Obama administration, there were 368,574 convicted criminals on the same docket. The numbers reflect accumulation over decades, not a single administration. The sources for that information is CBS News, citing ICE data and DHS Inspector General's report, October 2024. Now, here's a documented fact that all sides should agree on. As of mid-2024, there were 662,566 non-citizens with criminal histories not in custody, 13,099 convicted of murder, 15,811 convicted of sexual assault. That includes child molestation and rape. Those numbers existed regardless of which administration accumulated them. and they represent a documented public safety reality that the American people have a right to know about and a right to demand their government address. From 2016 to 2023, ICE arrested 31,889 non-citizens who were known or suspected gang members. It arrested 432 known or suspected terrorists, with 2023 being a record year with 139 arrests alone, more than double 2022. ICE arrested non-citizens charged or convicted of 12,394 homicides from 2017 to 2023. Let me say that again. More than 12,394 homicides between the years of 2017 and 2023 were committed by undocumented, non-citizen, illegal immigrants. The source for that is the Investigative News Substack, citing ICE annual reports and a GAO report. Let's let more of them across the border, huh? Here's the H-1B visa corruption. The story that is directly connected to millions of American working citizens, and it has received far less attention than the border numbers. The H-1B visa program was designed with a specific documented purpose: to allow American companies to hire highly skilled foreign professionals in specialty occupations when qualified domestic candidates were not available. When qualified domestic candidates are not available. That is the legal stated intent of the program. And here's what the documented record shows has been happening instead of that intended program. Sorry, this content has me passionate because I'm all about America first and we, the people. The Department of Labor launched Project Firewall in September of 2025, opening 175 investigations into potential abuses of the H-1B visa program. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer personally certified the initiation of the investigations, a mechanism the department has never used before. She stated, quote, "There are companies across this nation who have used this program, but they have either abused it to get into the program or they're abusing it within the program," end quote. Project Firewall will ensure employers prioritize qualified Americans when hiring workers. The $100,000 fee for new H-1B applications was announced on the very same day. The sources for this information is Fox News on November 7th, 2025, and it was corroborated by Newsweek on November 10th, 2025. The Texas governor, Greg Abbott, God bless him, halted new H-1B visa petitions by state agencies and public universities while the state investigates potential program abuse. In his letter, Abbott cited reports of cases in which American workers were displaced by lower paid foreign labor. He wrote, quote, "In the most egregious schemes, employers have even fired American workers and replaced them with H-1B employees, often at lower wages, rather than serving its intended purpose of attracting the best and brightest individuals from around the world." Excuse me. To fill truly specialized and unmet labor needs, the program has too often been used to fill jobs that otherwise could and should have been filled by Texans, end quote. The source for that is Abbott's actual official letter. that he wrote in 2026. Justin Vianello, CEO of Skillstorm, told Newsweek that certain companies had utilized the H-1B program as a means of labor arbitrage, employing foreign-born workers specifically because they are tied to their employer through their visa status and cannot easily leave for a competitor or demand higher wages. H-1B workers tied to employers via visa sponsorship face deportation if they quit, creating a documented power imbalance that depresses wages for everyone in that field. The source for that information is Newsweek, November 10th in 2025. Thousands of skilled migrants with H-1B visas working as subcontractors at well-known corporations including Disney, FedEx, and Google appear to have been underpaid by at least $95 million, according to the documented research by the Economic Policy Institute examining HCL Technologies, an India-based IT staffing firm that earned $11 billion in revenue placing workers at these companies. The source for that information is the Economic Policy Institute, citing corporate documentation 2021, and it was updated in 2025. The Center for Immigration Studies documented alarming patterns of fraud in the H-1B program, including forged degrees. In other words, they're not even skilled laborers. They're just regular freaking people trying to get to the country. And they're using the H-1B visa program to do so. Falsified employment credentials, and third-party staffing companies bypassing the program's original rationale. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's investigation found 3 North Texas companies running ghost offices, listing homes as corporate addresses and advertising products that do not exist, to fraudulently sponsor H-1B visas and deprive U.S. citizens of job opportunities. The source of that information is the Center for Immigration Studies and the Texas Attorney General's Office, January 2026. Let me make the documented constitutional connection explicit. The founders built the republic around the concept of American citizens, laboring, building, competing on equal terms under the law. No special advantage for the connected. No rigged system that exploits foreign workers while simultaneously displacing American ones. The documented H-1 abuse, where companies import workers specifically because those workers cannot leave without losing their visa, is a documented exploitation that harms both the foreign worker trapped in a power imbalance and the American worker who was never given the job. Both deserve better. DHS reported that ICE arrested more than 675,000 illegal aliens from the beginning of the Trump administration through early 2026. DHS also estimates that 2.2 million illegal aliens have self-deported. 70% of those arrested by ICE are criminal illegal aliens charged or convicted of a crime. ICE now has 120% more officers and agents after hiring 12,000 new personnel. DHS signed more than 1,255 agreements with state and local law enforcement partners. That is an official statement made by the DHS, January 20th, 2026. CBP nationwide border encounters decreased nearly 88% in 2025 compared to 2024. Southwest border encounters dropped 93%. On June 28, 2025, Border Patrol apprehended just 136 illegal aliens, the lowest single day of apprehensions in U.S. Border Patrol history. The source for that is the House Homeland Security Committee border brief, July 2025. A Signal poll found 60% of Americans support mass deportations, including 50% of Hispanics surveyed also support mass deportations. 50% of the Hispanics surveyed support mass deportations. That source was the House Homeland Security Committee. The complete honest picture and where the data shows gaps. Overall deportations remained well below the stated goal of 1 million per year. ICE identified 435,000 unauthorized immigrants with criminal convictions in the United States who were not in custody. Of those, only 13,099 were convicted of murder and 15,811 were convicted of sexual assault. And as of the end of May 2025, ICE had arrested 752 non-citizens convicted of murder and 1,693 convicted of sexual assault. Out of those 13,099 and 15,811, respectively. The source for that information is the Migration Policy Institute on January 9th, 2026. The gap between stated priorities and documented outcomes. 13,099 identified convicted murderers. Only 752 of those were arrested. That is the documented shortfall between the administration's stated mission and the measured reality. So, out of 13,099 convicted murderers, 752 of them have been arrested. The rest of them are still roaming around America somewhere because they were allowed in here. Now, immigration in the 2026 midterms, and here is how all that affects the election integrity. I want to address this directly because it's one of the most contested issues in American politics, and it deserves a documented, honest answer. The central documented concern is this. During the Biden era, 10.8 million encounters were recorded. Those were just the recorded encounters. A significant but unknown number of people entered the country as gotaways without documentation. The Save America Act, which would require citizenship proof to vote in federal elections, is supported by 83% of Americans on photo ID and 75% on citizenship proof, according to Pew and Harvard polls. But yet, our representatives in the Senate failed to pass the Save America Act, 48 to 50. The documented position of supporters, non-citizen voting is already illegal. But without citizenship verification at registration, the documented gaps in the system create a theoretical vulnerability, particularly in close House races in states that saw significant unauthorized population increases. California. The documented position of opponents. The Bipartisan Policy Center found Utah's review of 2 million registered voters identified 1 confirmed non-citizen registration and 0 non-citizen votes. The documented instances of the problem are rare compared to the documented number of legal citizens who would be disenfranchised by strict documentary requirements. That is one state, and that is the Democrats trying to play it off like there's no undocumented immigrants voting. Both of those positions are documented. Both have legitimate constitutional grounding. The Fifth Amendment guarantees due process. The right to vote in a republic is reserved to citizens. The founders were specific on both. What the Revere Report can say with confidence from the documented record is this: an election system that cannot clearly verify citizenship status in a country that admitted to recording 10.8 million border encounters in 4 years is an election system operating at a level of uncertainty that undermines public confidence in electoral outcomes. Whether that uncertainty represents actual fraud or theoretical vulnerability is contested. That it undermines confidence is documented. 80% of Americans say they cannot agree on basic facts about the republic. That collapse of shared trust has roots in exactly this kind of systemic uncertainty. The founders built the republic on the documented premise that self-governance requires citizens who trust the process through which they govern themselves. When that trust is gone, the republic loses something essential. That is not partisan. That is Madison's documented standard for a functional republic. Let me close today with what I believe is the single most important thing I can offer you. This morning, June 9th, 2026, an American Apache helicopter crew is down near Oman. Iran's airspace reopened. Israel stood down because the President of the United States made 2 phone calls. And somewhere in Tehran, people who have been fighting their own government since December 28th are still in the streets, chanting they will not accept humiliation. In Washington, the DOJ has charged 324 defendants in the biggest healthcare fraud takedown in American history. $14.6 billion in alleged fraud. Brett Blackman built an internet platform to industrialize Medicare fraud at a national scale. 3 Florida men, Scamarone, Mendez, and Vasquez, are now in federal prison for stealing from the program funded by your payroll taxes your entire working life. And in Los Angeles, 8 people were arrested for billing Medicare for hospice patients who were not dying. And in Congress, a program designed to attract the best talent from around the world is being systematically abused to fire American workers and replace them with foreign workers who cannot quit without losing their visas. Not only that, but they're not even skilled workers. While 175 federal investigations are underway, and Texas Governor Greg Abbott has halted the program entirely in his state. These are not separate stories. They are the same story. A constitutional republic requires that its government be accountable to the law above all. Madison wrote that every government must be obliged to control itself. When it does not, when it spends the public's money without accounting for it, when it builds systems that exploit both foreign workers and American ones, when it commits the nation to armed conflict without the authorization of the people's representatives, the Republic's foundation cracks. Not all at once, not dramatically, but incrementally, amendment by amendment, agency by agency, fraud case by fraud case, border encounter by border encounter. The founders saw this coming. Washington named it in 1796. Jefferson named it in 1789. Madison designed every check and balance in the Constitution specifically to prevent it. The document is still there. Every word still in force. Every protection still legally supreme. The question, as it has always been, is whether enough citizens know it well enough to demand it be honored. That is what the Revere Report exists to build, and that is what the Paul Revere Society was built to sustain. Subscribe to this channel. Share this stream with one American who deserves to know what we covered this morning, and join the Paul Revere Society. The link is in the description and also in the bio of this channel. Oh, we're building something real, one informed citizen at a time. I'm John Schumann, Revere Report. The Republic belongs to the people who understand it. It always has. Ride with us.